Commander Zeph-9 stared at the holographic display floating above his command deck, watching the final human transmission flicker and die. The blue-green marble that was Earth spun slowly in the projection, now dark and silent after 3 months of radio silence. "Sir, that was the last automated beacon from the Luna colony," reported his communications officer, a tall Valkorian with silver skin that shimmered under the bridge lights. "All human settlements have gone completely quiet." Zeph-9 nodded grimly. As the leader of the Galactic Coalition's monitoring station in this sector, he had watched humanity's rapid decline with a mixture of fascination and horror. The humans had been such a promising species when they first joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Their innovation, their stubborn refusal to give up, their incredible ability to adapt, it had impressed even the most advanced civilizations. But then came the plague. It started small, as these things always do. A strange virus that seemed harmless at first, causing nothing more than mild fatigue and headaches. The humans, with their typical confidence, assured the galaxy that they would handle it quickly. They had conquered diseases before, they said. This would be no different. How wrong they were. The virus mutated faster than their medical technology could adapt. Within months it had spread across every human colony, every ship, every settlement. The Coalition had offered help, but the humans were too proud to accept it until it was too late. By the time they swallowed their pride and asked for assistance, the virus had already begun shutting down their immune systems entirely. Zeph-9 remembered the desperate messages that flooded the galactic networks. Human leaders begging for medical supplies, for researchers, for any hope of salvation. The Coalition had tried, sending their best doctors and scientists to Earth and the human colonies. But the virus seemed specifically designed to target human biology in ways that made no sense to alien medical science. One by one, the human worlds fell silent. Mars colony stopped transmitting after 6 weeks. The mining stations in the asteroid belt went dark one by one. The proud human fleet, once numbering in the thousands of ships, was reduced to a handful of vessels carrying refugees who died before they could reach safe harbor. "Sir," interrupted Lieutenant Crix, his tactical officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Coalition Command." The hologram shifted, revealing the stern face of Admiral Thorn Prime, the Altarian who served as the Coalition's Supreme Commander. His 4 eyes focused intently on Zeph-9 as he spoke. "Commander, you are hereby ordered to establish a quarantine perimeter around the former human territories. Effective immediately, no vessel is to approach within 50 light-years of any former human world or installation. The plague that destroyed humanity shows signs of being artificially created, and we cannot risk it spreading to other species." Zeph-9 felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. "Artificially created, sir? Are you suggesting someone deliberately targeted humanity?" "That is precisely what I'm suggesting, Commander. Our xenobiologists have analyzed the virus structure from the samples the humans provided before their final collapse. The genetic modifications are too precise, too specifically targeted to be natural. Someone wanted humanity extinct and they succeeded. The implications were staggering. In the 50,000 years since the Coalition was formed, no member species had ever attempted genocide against another. There had been conflicts, territorial disputes, even wars, but nothing like this. The very foundation of galactic civilization was built on the principle that all intelligent life had value and deserved protection. "What are your orders regarding the quarantine, sir?" Zeph-9 asked, though he already knew the answer would not sit well with him. "Total isolation. Mark all former human territories as dead zones on the star charts. No salvage operations, no scientific expeditions, no memorial missions. As far as the galaxy is concerned, humanity never existed. We cannot risk another species suffering the same fate." After the transmission ended, Zeph-9 stood in the silence of his bridge, watching Earth's slow rotation on the display. Somewhere down there in the empty cities and abandoned homes lay the remnants of a species that had shown such promise. The humans had contributed so much to galactic culture in their brief time among the stars. Their music, their art, their incredible stories of perseverance against impossible odds, all of it would now be forgotten. "Sir?" His communications officer's voice was hesitant. "What should I tell the Memorial Planning Committee on Altair 7? They were organizing a remembrance ceremony for humanity." "Tell them the ceremony is canceled," Zeph-9 replied quietly. "By order of Coalition Command, there will be no official recognition of humanity's passing." No monuments, no memorials, no records in the official histories. The bridge crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. Every one of them had worked alongside humans at some point. The Coalition's integrated service structure meant that humans had served on alien ships, just as aliens had served on human vessels. They had fought together, explored together, built friendships that transcended species barriers. Now, it was as if none of that had ever happened. Over the following weeks, Zeph-9 watched as the cleanup began. Coalition ships swept through human space, collecting any technology or information that might be useful while carefully avoiding contamination. The great human cities were left to decay, their empty streets already being reclaimed by nature. The space stations were powered down and left to drift in the void, monuments to a dead civilization that no one was allowed to remember. But late at night, when the bridge was quiet and his crew was asleep, Zeph-9 would sometimes call up the old recordings, videos of human children laughing, human musicians performing, human explorers taking their first steps on alien worlds. He would watch these forbidden memories and wonder what the galaxy had lost when humanity died. Would also wonder who had wanted them dead so badly that they were willing to create a plague specifically designed to wipe them out. The investigation into the virus's origins had been classified at the highest levels, but Zeph-9 had his suspicions. There were species in the galaxy who had never been comfortable with humanity's rapid advancement, who had spoken openly about the human problem in the council chambers. Now the problem was solved, and the galaxy moved on as if humanity had never existed at all. But Zeph-9 couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Whoever had orchestrated humanity's extinction had succeeded too completely, too efficiently. This felt like a test run, a proof of concept for something much larger and more terrible. As he stared at the silent Earth one last time before the quarantine barriers were activated, Zeph-9 made a decision that would have cost him his career if anyone had known. He began keeping records hidden deep in his personal files of everything humanity had been and everything they had meant to the galaxy. Someone needed to remember. Someone needed to bear witness to this crime. And someday, when the truth finally came to light, the galaxy would need those memories to understand what they had lost and what they had allowed to happen in their name. 5 years had passed since the quarantine barriers went up around human space, and Dr. Yenara Vell thought she had seen everything the galaxy could throw at her. As the Coalition's leading xenoarchaeologist, she had explored the ruins of a dozen extinct civilizations, piecing together their final moments from scattered artifacts and crumbling monuments. But nothing had prepared her for what she found drifting in the void between stars. The object was massive, easily the size of a small moon, yet it had gone undetected until her research vessel's sensors picked up its unusual energy signature. It was clearly artificial, covered in what appeared to be some kind of adaptive camouflage that had kept it hidden for who knew how long. The surface was smooth and dark, with no visible openings or markings that might indicate its origin. Dr. Vell called out her assistant, a young Centaurian named Jorik, whose enthusiasm often made up for his lack of experience. The preliminary scans are complete. This thing is old, really old. The radiation decay patterns suggest it's been drifting here for at least 1,000 years, maybe longer. Yenara studied the readings on her tablet, her forearms working simultaneously to analyze different data streams. The energy signature was unlike anything in the Coalition database, which was troubling. After 50,000 years of galactic civilization, there weren't many technological signatures that remained unknown. "Any signs of life aboard?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Negative on all bioscanners. Whatever built this, they're long gone. But Dr. Vell, there's something else. The hull composition includes materials that aren't on any periodic table I know. The molecular structure is impossible according to our current understanding of physics." This was exactly the kind of discovery that had made Yenara's career. She had built her reputation on finding the impossible and making it understandable. The Council of Sciences had funded her expeditions precisely because she could extract meaning from the most obscure archaeological finds. "Prep the shuttle," she ordered. "We're going aboard. Is that wise, Doctor? We don't know what kind of technology we're dealing with. There could be automated defenses or worse." Yenara looked at her young assistant with amusement. "Jorik, in 30 years of doing this job, I've learned that the greatest discoveries always require a leap of faith. Besides, if whoever built this wanted to hurt visitors, they wouldn't have hidden it so well." The shuttle bay on the alien vessel opened for them without any apparent activation mechanism, as if it had been waiting for their arrival. The interior was vast and eerily beautiful, with walls that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. The architecture was unlike anything in the Coalition archives, flowing and organic despite being clearly technological. As they moved deeper into the ship, their scanners picked up something that made Yanara's blood run cold. Energy readings that were still active, still functioning after a millennium of drifting in space. But more importantly, she began to detect traces of something that shouldn't exist in this part of the galaxy anymore. Human DNA. "Doctor," Jorik whispered, his voice tight with confusion. "These genetic traces, they match the samples in our restricted files, the ones from the quarantine territories." "That's impossible," Yanara muttered, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't. Her scanners were among the most advanced in the galaxy. They didn't make mistakes about something this significant. They found the first chamber after 20 minutes of walking through corridors that seemed to adjust their lighting automatically as they passed. Inside, they discovered something that would change everything they thought they knew about the recent past. Stasis pods. Hundreds of them, arranged in neat rows throughout the vast chamber, and inside each pod, perfectly preserved, was a human being. Yanara stood frozen, staring at the impossible sight. According to every official record, every government document, every scientific report, humanity had been extinct for 5 years. The plague had killed them all, and their worlds had been quarantined to prevent the spread of the virus that destroyed them. Yet here were hundreds of humans, sleeping peacefully in stasis, their life signs strong and steady. "Doctor," Jorik's voice was barely a whisper, "look at the dates on the pods." Yanara approached the nearest stasis unit and examined the display panel. The characters were in human script, which she had learned as part of her comprehensive linguistic training. The date made her stomach drop. The humans had been in stasis for 53 years. They had been sleeping since before the plague even started. "Jorik, start recording everything. Full sensor sweeps, detailed photographs, complete genetic analysis of the pod contents. This changes everything we know about what happened to humanity." As they worked, Yanara's mind raced through the implications. If these humans had been in stasis for over 50 years, they predated the plague entirely. But that meant someone had known to preserve them, had known that something terrible was coming for their species. The deeper they explored the ship, the more questions arose. They found laboratories filled with human genetic samples, computer cores containing vast databases of human culture and history, and most disturbing of all, detailed files on something called Project Exodus. "Doctor, you need to see this," Jorik called from across the main computer core chamber. "I've managed to access some of the ship's records. This isn't just a preservation facility. It's an escape pod." The files told a story that shattered everything the galaxy believed about humanity's final years. A secret organization within human society had discovered evidence of a planned biological attack against their species. They had identified the development of a targeted virus designed specifically to kill humans, and they had learned that the attack would be blamed on natural evolution. But most shocking of all was the identity of the organization behind the planned genocide. It wasn't some unknown alien threat or mysterious enemy from beyond the galaxy's edge. The plague had been developed and deployed by a coalition of established galactic powers who had grown fearful of humanity's rapid technological advancement and increasing influence in galactic politics. The Velcorians, the Altarians, the Centaurians, all the major powers that now made up the coalition's ruling council had been involved in the conspiracy to eliminate humanity. "They knew," Yanara whispered, staring at the evidence displayed on the alien computer screens. "The coalition leadership knew about the plague because they created it." The ship's records revealed that a small group of human scientists and government officials had learned about the conspiracy just weeks before the plague was scheduled to be released. They had barely enough time to gather a few hundred volunteers and put them into stasis aboard this hidden vessel before the attack began. The humans in the stasis pods weren't the only survivors. According to the ship's logs, there were supposed to be other vessels, other groups of humans hidden throughout the galaxy, waiting for the day when it would be safe to emerge and rebuild their civilization. But something had gone wrong. The ship's automated systems had been monitoring galactic communications for 5 years, waiting for the all-clear signal that never came. The other ships had either been discovered and destroyed, or their hidden locations had been compromised. As far as the ship's computers could determine, these sleeping humans might be the last members of their species in the entire galaxy. Yanara stood in the silence of the alien ship, surrounded by the sleeping forms of a supposedly extinct species, holding evidence of the greatest crime in galactic history. The coalition she had served faithfully for decades, the government she had trusted to protect all intelligent life, had committed genocide against one of their own member species, and now she had to decide what to do about it. "Jorik," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they had discovered. "We're going to wake them up. Doctor, the regulations clearly state that any discovery of this magnitude must be reported immediately to Coalition Command. We can't just—" "The regulations were written by the same people who murdered an entire species," Yanara interrupted. "I've spent my career uncovering the truth about extinct civilizations. Well, here's a civilization that doesn't have to be extinct after all." She moved to the nearest stasis pod and began studying the revival protocols displayed on its control panel. The systems were human-designed but surprisingly intuitive. It would take time to safely revive the sleepers, but it could be done. As she worked, Yanara thought about the choice she was making. By the time she returned to Coalition space, she would be branded a traitor and a criminal. Her career would be over and she would likely spend the rest of her life in prison. But she would also be giving an extinct species a chance to live again. And perhaps if they were lucky, they could expose the truth about what had really happened to humanity. The galaxy deserved to know what its leaders were capable of, and humanity deserved a chance at justice. The first human to wake up was a woman named Captain Sarah Chen, and when her eyes opened after 53 years of sleep, the first thing she saw was Dr. Yanara Vell's concerned face hovering over her stasis pod. The revival process had taken 6 hours, and Yanara had spent every minute of it wondering if she was making the right choice. "Easy, easy," Yanara said softly, as Sarah tried to sit up too quickly. "You've been asleep for a very long time. Your body needs time to adjust." Sarah's voice was hoarse and weak, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "How long? And who are you?" 53 years. My name is Dr. Yanara Vell. I'm a xenoarchaeologist with the Galactic Coalition." Yanara paused, not sure how to explain what came next. "Captain Chen, I need to tell you something about what happened to your species." As Sarah slowly regained her strength, Yanara explained everything. The plague, the extinction of humanity, the quarantine, and most importantly, the evidence she had found proving that it had all been planned. Sarah listened in silence, her expression growing harder with each revelation. "So the Coalition thinks we're all dead," Sarah said finally. "And according to you, they're the ones who killed us in the first place." "I'm afraid so. The evidence is overwhelming. I've documented everything, but I needed to wake you first to confirm the ship's records were accurate." Sarah managed to sit up fully, looking around at the rows of stasis pods containing her sleeping companions. "How many of us are there?" 437, including yourself. According to your ship's records, you were all volunteers who knew about the planned attack and agreed to go into stasis until it was safe to emerge. "I remember now," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. Dr. Martinez had discovered communications between Coalition species about something called Operation Clean Slate. They were planning to release a bioweapon that would target human DNA specifically, then blame it on natural viral evolution. We had maybe 2 weeks to prepare. "Dr. Martinez? Is he here?" Sarah nodded toward a pod near the center of the chamber. "Pod C-47. He was our lead scientist, the one who figured out what was coming. If you're going to wake anyone else first, it should be him." Dr. Elena Martinez took the news even worse than Sarah had. When Yanara finished explaining what had happened to humanity, the elderly scientist sat in stunned silence for several long minutes. 53 years, he finally whispered. "We've been asleep for 53 years while our entire species was murdered." "I'm sorry," Yanara said. "I know this is an incredible shock, but there's something else you need to know. According to your ship's records, there were supposed to be other preservation vessels, other groups of humans hidden throughout the galaxy." Martinez nodded slowly. "Project Exodus. We managed to save maybe 2,000 people total, spread across 7 ships. This was Exodus 4. He looked around the chamber with haunted eyes. "Are we the only ones left?" "Your ship's communication systems have been monitoring for Coalition transmissions about any human activity for 5 years. There's been nothing." "I'm afraid you might be," The weight of that statement settled over them like a physical burden. Sarah and Martinez exchanged glances, and Yanara could see a silent communication passing between them that spoke of shared responsibility and impossible decisions. "Dr. Vell," Sarah said carefully, "why did you wake us up? According to your own laws, discovering us should have been reported immediately to your government. Instead, you're here talking to people who are supposed to be extinct." Yanara had been dreading this question, but she had known it would come, because your government is the same government that murdered your species. How could I trust them with your lives? That still doesn't explain why you're helping us. You're risking your career, probably your freedom. Why? The question hung in the air while Yanara considered how to answer. The truth was complex and personal, rooted in a lifetime of studying extinct civilizations and wondering what might have been saved if someone had acted differently. "In my profession, I spend a lot of time with dead cultures," she said finally. "I study their artifacts, I piece together their histories. I try to understand what they were like when they were alive. But they're always just memories, just echoes of something that once existed. You're not dead yet. You don't have to be just another extinct species in my research files." Martinez studied her with intelligent eyes. "And what exactly do you think 400 humans can do against the entire galactic coalition? Even if we had proof of what they did, who would we tell? Who would believe us?" "I don't know," Yanara admitted. "But I do know that the galaxy deserves to know the truth about what happened. The coalition was built on the principle that all intelligent life has value. If that principle doesn't mean anything, if member species can be eliminated whenever they become inconvenient, then everything we've built is a lie." Sarah stood up, testing her balance after decades of sleep. "Doctor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you really believe we can expose the truth and get justice for what was done to our people?" Yanara met her gaze steadily. "I don't know if we can get justice, but I believe we have to try. The alternative is letting the people who committed genocide get away with it completely. And if we fail, if they catch us and eliminate us the way they eliminated the rest of humanity, then at least we'll have tried. At least someone will have stood up and said that what happened was wrong." Martinez laughed bitterly. "You realize what you're asking us to do, don't you? You want 400 humans who just learned their entire species is extinct to somehow take on the most powerful government in galactic history." "I'm not asking you to do anything," Yanara replied. "I'm offering you a choice. You can stay here in hiding, safe but alone, the last remnants of humanity, or you can come with me and try to make sure this never happens to anyone else." Sarah and Martinez looked at each other again, and Yanara could see the weight of representing their entire species settling on their shoulders. These weren't just individuals making a personal decision. They were potentially the last humans in the galaxy, and whatever they chose would determine humanity's final legacy. "There's something else," Martinez said quietly. "Something we haven't told you about this ship." Yanara felt a chill of anticipation. "What do you mean?" "Project Exodus wasn't just about preserving human lives. We were also tasked with preserving human knowledge and technology. This ship contains complete databases of everything we had learned by the time we went into stasis. But more than that, we were working on certain projects that we thought might be necessary for our survival." Sarah looked uncomfortable. "Elena, are you sure we should—" "She deserves to know what she's getting involved in," Martinez interrupted. "Dr. Vell, when we discovered the Coalition's plan to eliminate us, we didn't just prepare to hide. We prepared to fight back." Yanara's hearts began beating faster. "What kind of preparations?" Martinez moved to a wall panel and activated a holographic display. "We developed countermeasures, weapons designed specifically to neutralize the biological and technological advantages of each Coalition species. We created viruses that could target Velcorian nervous systems, electromagnetic pulses calibrated to disrupt Altarian cybernetic implants, sonic frequencies that could incapacitate Centaurian hearing organs." The display showed detailed schematics of weapons that were clearly designed for one purpose: to level the playing field between humanity and the species that had tried to destroy them. "We called it Project Retribution," Sarah added quietly. "We hoped we would never have to use it, but we knew that if we were discovered, we might need to defend ourselves against impossible odds." Yanara stared at the weapon designs with a mixture of fascination and horror. "You were planning to commit genocide in return?" "No," Martinez said firmly. "We were planning to survive." "There's a difference," These weapons are designed to incapacitate, not to kill entire species, but they would give us the ability to fight back if we needed to. And now you're telling me this because... Sarah stepped forward. Because if we're going to try to expose the truth about what happened to humanity, we need to be prepared for the Coalition's response. They won't just let us walk into their council chambers and present our evidence. They'll try to eliminate us the same way they eliminated the rest of our species. But with these weapons, we might actually have a chance to defend ourselves long enough to get the truth out to the galaxy, Martinez added. Yanara realized she was standing at a crossroads that would determine not just her own future, but potentially the future of galactic civilization itself. She could walk away now, report the discovery through official channels and let the Coalition handle the situation quietly. The humans would disappear, the truth would remain hidden, and life would go on as it had before. Or she could help a supposedly extinct species prepare for war against the government she had served her entire life. How long would it take to wake the others? She asked. Sarah smiled grimly. About a week if we do it carefully. Why? The awakening process took exactly 8 days, and with each human who emerged from stasis, Dr. Yanara Vell watched the grief and rage build to dangerous levels. By the time the last pod opened, she found herself surrounded by 400 people who had just learned that everyone they had ever known outside this ship was dead, and that their own government had been responsible for the genocide. Captain Sarah Chen had taken charge naturally, her military training helping her organize the confused and angry survivors. Dr. Martinez had thrown himself into reviewing the ship's technical systems, preparing their hidden weapons for potential use. But it was Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison who worried Yanara the most. Morrison had been one of humanity's top intelligence officers, specializing in covert operations and psychological warfare. When he learned about the Coalition's betrayal, his response had been cold and calculating in a way that made Yanara's skin crawl. Dr. Vell, Morrison said, approaching her in the ship's main planning chamber. I've been reviewing the evidence you've collected about our extinction. It's comprehensive, but it won't be enough. What do you mean? Yanara asked, though she suspected she already knew. Evidence can be dismissed, discredited, explained away. The Coalition has had 5 years to perfect their cover story about the plague that killed humanity. They'll have backup documentation, expert witnesses, scientific studies that support their version of events. Our word alone won't be enough to convince anyone. Sarah joined their conversation, her expression grim. Jake's right. We need more than just proof of what happened. We need leverage. What kind of leverage? Yanara asked, though she was beginning to fear the answer. Morrison activated a holographic display showing Coalition fleet positions throughout the galaxy. The kind that makes it impossible for them to simply eliminate us and cover up the evidence. We need to make ourselves too dangerous to kill quietly. Over the following hours, Morrison outlined a plan that was both brilliant and terrifying. Rather than simply presenting their evidence to the galactic media or the Coalition Council, they would simultaneously strike at multiple targets throughout Coalition space, not to kill, but to demonstrate that humanity was far from extinct and possessed the ability to cause serious damage to any species that had participated in their genocide. We'll hit their communication relays first, Morrison explained, pointing to key installations on the star chart. Disable their ability to coordinate a response. Then we target their military command centers with electromagnetic pulses that will shut down their systems without causing permanent damage. Finally, we broadcast our evidence from every major population center in the galaxy simultaneously. Dr. Martinez looked uncomfortable with the plan. Jake, what you're describing is terrorism. We'd be attacking civilian targets. We'd be attacking military and government targets, Morrison corrected. And we'd be doing it with non-lethal weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. The only casualties would be to their pride and their ability to cover up what they did to us. Sarah studied the tactical display with a military officer's eye for detail. It's risky. If even one part of the operation fails, they'll track us down and finish what they started. And if we're wrong about the non-lethal nature of our weapons, then we'll be no worse than the people who tried to murder our entire species. Morrison replied coldly. Yanara felt like she was watching a peaceful archaeological expedition transform into a military operation. There has to be another way. Some approach that doesn't involve attacking Coalition installations. Morrison turned to her with patient eyes that held no warmth. Doctor, let me explain something about how governments work when their survival is threatened. The coalition leadership knows that if the truth about humanity's extinction comes out, it will destroy everything they've built. 50,000 years of galactic cooperation will collapse when member species realize that their own government is capable of genocide. He activated another display showing coalition political structures. They will do absolutely anything to prevent that from happening. If we approach them through official channels, we'll disappear. If we try to go through the media, they'll discredit us and then we'll disappear. If we attempt to present our case to the member species directly, they'll declare us a terrorist threat and then we'll disappear. So you're saying violence is our only option? I'm saying that credible threat of violence is our only option. We need to demonstrate that eliminating us will cost more than letting us speak. Once we've proven we can strike at the heart of their power structure, they'll have to negotiate with us instead of simply killing us. Sarah looked around at their assembled companions, 400 humans who represented the last of their species. Some were scientists, others were engineers, a few were military personnel like herself. All of them had volunteered for stasis, knowing they might be the only hope for humanity's survival. Jake's plan has merit, she said finally, but I want to add a modification. Before we do anything that could be seen as an attack, we try the diplomatic route. One attempt at official contact with coalition leadership. Morrison shook his head. Sarah, that's suicide. The moment we reveal ourselves officially, they'll what? Attack us immediately with no attempt at negotiation. If that happens, it proves we were right about their intentions, and it justifies everything we do afterward. But if there's even a small chance that some coalition leaders weren't part of the original conspiracy, we owe it to ourselves, and to the galaxy, to try peace first. Dr. Martinez nodded in agreement. I support Sarah's approach. We're talking about actions that could destabilize the entire galactic government. We need to be absolutely certain there's no alternative before we take that step. Yanara felt a surge of relief. Despite everything they had been through, despite learning that their entire species had been murdered, these humans were still trying to find a peaceful solution. It reminded her why she had chosen to help them in the first place. All right, Morrison said reluctantly. We try diplomacy first, but we prepare for war. If the coalition's response to our diplomatic contact is anything other than complete cooperation, we implement the full operation immediately. Over the next several days, they planned both approaches simultaneously. Sarah and Dr. Martinez worked on a formal presentation of their evidence, complete with detailed analysis of the plague's artificial origins and documentation of the conspiracy. Meanwhile, Morrison and his team prepared strike plans for dozens of coalition installations throughout the galaxy. Yanara found herself serving as an intermediary between the two groups, helping the diplomats understand coalition political structures while advising the military planners on the locations of critical installations. It was a strange position for an archaeologist, but she realized that her knowledge of galactic civilization made her uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between peace and war. Doctor, Sarah said during one of their planning sessions, I need to ask you something personal. Why are you really helping us? And please don't give me the speech about extinct civilizations. There's something more, isn't there? Yanara hesitated before answering. I had a colleague once, a human named Dr. James Wright. He worked with me on several excavations before the plague hit. James had this theory that the reason so many civilizations went extinct wasn't because of natural disasters or resource depletion. He believed most extinctions were caused by other intelligent species eliminating competition. What happened to him? He died in the plague like all the rest. But before he died, he sent me a message. Just a few words. I was right about competition. At the time, I thought he was delirious from the virus. Now I realize he had figured out what was really happening. Sarah nodded slowly. So this is personal for you too. James was a good friend and a brilliant scientist. If he were alive today, he would want the truth to come out no matter what the cost. I'm doing this for him, and for every other human who died believing they were victims of a natural plague instead of murder. As their preparations neared completion, Yanara realized that she was no longer just an observer documenting the last days of an extinct species. She had become an active participant in what might be humanity's final stand against the forces that had tried to destroy them. In a few days, they would make contact with the coalition and discover whether there was any hope for a peaceful resolution. If not, The galaxy would learn that humanity was far from extinct, and that the survivors were not in a forgiving mood. The ship's computer systems had been upgraded with new communication, arrays capable of broadcasting across the entire galactic network simultaneously. Dr. Martinez had spent days perfecting the transmission protocols, ensuring that their message would reach every major population center before the Coalition could block or intercept it. Meanwhile, Morrison's tactical teams had identified 47 critical targets across Coalition space: military command centers, communication relays, government facilities, and infrastructure hubs that, if disabled simultaneously, would create enough chaos to prevent an organized response to humanity's return. Tinez designed will give us maybe 6 hours of advantage before they. The Coalition Council chambers on Altair Prime had not seen such urgent activity in decades. Admiral Thorne Prime sat at the head of the massive circular table, his 4 eyes fixed on the holographic message that had arrived just hours ago. Around him, the representatives of 12 major species shifted uncomfortably in their seats, all struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The message had been brief, but devastating. A human woman identifying herself as Captain Sarah Chen claimed to be speaking for 400 surviving members of humanity, and she had evidence that the plague which destroyed her species had been artificially created by Coalition leadership. She was requesting a formal meeting with the Council to present this evidence and discuss terms for humanity's return to galactic society. This is obviously some kind of elaborate hoax, declared Senator Vix-9 of the Velcorian delegation, his silver skin reflecting the chamber's lights nervously. Humanity has been extinct for 5 years. We all saw the final reports from the quarantine zones. The genetic verification codes in the transmission are authentic, replied Dr. Jack Prime, the Coalition's head of xenobiology. I personally analyzed the human DNA samples from the plague sites. This message definitely came from actual humans. Admiral Thorne Prime studied the faces around the table, reading the fear and confusion in their expressions. 3 of the species represented here, the Velcorians, his own Altarians, and the Centaurians, had been part of the original conspiracy to eliminate humanity. The others had been kept in the dark, believing the official story about a natural plague. How is this possible? Asked Ambassador Krell of the Saurian Republic, one of the uninformed species. Our medical teams confirmed that the virus had a 100% fatality rate among humans. How could any of them have survived? Thorne Prime exchanged glances with Senator Vix-9 and Chancellor Brom-7 of the Centaurian Alliance. They all knew exactly how it was possible. The humans had somehow discovered the plot and hidden survivors before the plague was released. But admitting that would expose the entire conspiracy. There are several possible explanations, Thorne Prime said carefully. Perhaps these humans were off-world when the plague struck, in some remote location that wasn't affected. Or they might have developed immunity through genetic modification. Sir, interrupted Communications Officer Neth-5, we are receiving another transmission from the human vessel. They're requesting our response to their proposal for a meeting. The chamber fell silent as everyone considered the implications. If these humans really did have evidence of the artificial nature of the plague, presenting it to the Council would be catastrophic for the conspiracy members. But refusing to meet with them would look suspicious to the uninformed species. What do we know about their current location and capabilities? Asked Chancellor Brom-7. They're aboard an unidentified vessel approximately 40 light-years from our nearest military installation. Long-range scans suggest the ship has advanced shielding and weapon systems, but we can't get detailed readings from this distance. Ambassador Krell leaned forward in her seat. Surely the appropriate response is to welcome these survivors back to galactic society. If they truly are the last humans in the galaxy, they deserve our protection and assistance. Several other uninformed representatives nodded in agreement, but Thorne Prime could see the panic in Vix-9's eyes. The Velcorian senator was clearly struggling not to reveal what he knew about the situation. Of course, Thorne Prime said smoothly. We want to help any human survivors, but we must also be cautious. We don't know what they've been through during their isolation, or what their intentions might be. For all we know, they could be carrying new strains of the virus that killed their species. Dr. Jack Prime looked confused. Admiral, the plague was specifically designed to target human biology. It couldn't affect other species, and it certainly couldn't be carried by immune humans. Thorne Prime realized his mistake immediately. He had just revealed knowledge about the plague that wasn't in any official report. I misspoke. I meant we should be cautious about any new diseases they might have encountered during their isolation, but the damage was done. Several of the uninformed representatives were looking at him with suspicion now, wondering how he knew so much about the plague's specific targeting mechanisms. "Admiral," said Ambassador Krell slowly, "how exactly do you know that the plague was designed to target human biology specifically?" That information wasn't in any of the reports I reviewed. The chamber was suddenly very quiet. Thorn Prime could feel the conspiracy unraveling around him, exposed by his own careless words. He looked around the table and saw understanding beginning to dawn on the faces of the uninformed representatives. "I think," said Chancellor Yem III of the Draconian Assembly, "that we need to hear what these human survivors have to say. All of us." Before Thorn Prime could object, Communications Officer Neth 5 spoke up again. "Sirs, the human vessel is hailing us directly. They're requesting an immediate response to their proposal." "Put them through," ordered Ambassador Krell, overriding Thorn Prime's authority, as she invoked her right as a senior council member to hear testimony from survivors of an extinct species. The holographic display activated, revealing the face of a middle-aged human woman in what appeared to be a ship's bridge. Behind her, other humans could be seen working at various stations, their movements calm and purposeful despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. "Greetings. Coalition Council," Captain Sarah Chen said, her voice steady and professional. "I am Captain Sarah Chen, representing the survivors of humanity. We are requesting formal diplomatic recognition and protection under galactic law as we present evidence of crimes committed against our species." "This is Admiral Thorn Prime," the Altarian replied, struggling to maintain his composure. "The Coalition is of course willing to discuss your situation, but we must first verify your claims and ensure the safety of all parties involved." Sarah's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Admiral, we have documented evidence that the plague which supposedly destroyed humanity was artificially created and deliberately deployed by Coalition forces. We also have proof of the conspiracy to cover up this genocide. We are prepared to present this evidence to the full council immediately." The chamber erupted in shocked voices as the uninformed representatives began demanding explanations. Several of them turned to stare at Thorn Prime, Vix 9, and Brom 7 with growing suspicion and horror. "These are serious accusations," Thorn Prime said, fighting to keep his voice level. "Do you have any proof to support these claims?" Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Admiral, we have complete communication records of the conspiracy, genetic analysis proving the artificial nature of the plague, and detailed documentation of the cover-up that followed. We also have the testimony of 400 witnesses who can verify that we were placed in stasis specifically to avoid the planned genocide." "Impossible," whispered Senator Vix 9, apparently forgetting that his microphone was still active. Sarah's attention shifted to the Velcorian senator. "Senator Vix 9, we have recordings of your personal communications with Admiral Thorn Prime and Chancellor Brom 7 discussing the timeline for Operation Clean Slate. Would you like me to play them for the council?" The silence that followed was deafening. Even the conspiracy members couldn't hide their shock at the extent of the evidence the humans apparently possessed. Ambassador Krell stood up slowly, her reptilian features twisted with disgust. "Admiral Thorn Prime, I am formally requesting that you submit to immediate investigation by the Council's internal security forces." The same applies to Senator Vix 9 and Chancellor Brom 7. "Now wait just a moment," Brom 7 protested. "These accusations are completely unfounded. We have no obligation to—" "Actually, you do," interrupted Sarah from the display. "Admiral, we are prepared to present our evidence to the Council immediately, with or without your cooperation. The choice is whether you want to respond as the criminals you are, or as the leaders you pretended to be." Thorn Prime realized that their carefully constructed cover-up was collapsing completely. The humans had somehow acquired evidence that should have been impossible to obtain, and they were presenting it in a way that made denial impossible. "What do you want?" he asked quietly, the fight going out of him. "Justice," Sarah replied simply, "for our species, and for every other species in the galaxy that needs to know what their government is capable of. We want full disclosure of Operation Clean Slate, prosecution of everyone involved in the genocide, and guarantees that nothing like this will ever happen again." "And if we refuse?" Sarah's smile turned genuinely cold. Then you'll discover that humanity developed some very interesting defensive capabilities during our time in hiding. Admiral, we may be the last 400 humans in the galaxy, but we're not defenseless and we're not afraid of you anymore. As if to emphasize her point, alarms began sounding throughout the Coalition Command Center. On the tactical displays, dozens of installations across Coalition space were reporting system failures and communication blackouts. That was just a demonstration. Sarah continued calmly as chaos erupted around the council table. We can disable your entire military infrastructure whenever we choose. The emergency session of the Galactic Coalition Council, convened 6 hours after the humans' demonstration, had crippled installations across 12 star systems. Representatives from 47 species filled the expanded chambers on Altair Prime, called together to witness what would become the most significant political event in galactic history. Dr. Yanara Vel stood beside Captain Sarah Chen at the center of the chamber, both women facing the assembled delegates of galactic civilization. Behind them, holographic displays showed the evidence they had spent weeks preparing: communication records, genetic analyses, personnel files, and financial transactions that painted a complete picture of humanity's planned extinction. Honored delegates, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. 53 years ago, my species was targeted for elimination by members of this very council. Today we present proof of that genocide and demand justice for the billions of humans who died believing they were victims of a natural plague. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates shouted questions and accusations in dozens of languages. Ambassador Krell, now serving as acting council president after Admiral Thorn Prime's arrest, called for order with her ceremonial gavel. The human delegation will present their evidence without interruption, Krell announced. There will be time for questions afterward. Dr. Yanara activated the first holographic display, showing communication logs between the 3 conspiracy species. These are authenticated records of planning sessions for Operation Clean Slate, recovered from the hidden ship where the human survivors spent 53 years in stasis. The voice of Senator Vix 9 filled the chamber. Recorded decades ago, the human population growth rate is unsustainable. Their technological advancement threatens the balance of power we've maintained for millennia. We need a solution that appears natural. Gasps and angry murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates as they listened to their former colleagues calmly discussing the elimination of an entire species. Admiral Thorn Prime's voice followed. Dr. Jek Prime's bioweapon research shows promising results. We can create a virus that targets human DNA specifically, then blame the extinction on natural evolution. The other species will accept it as tragic but unavoidable. This is fabricated, shouted Representative Gix 7, one of the remaining Velcorian delegates. These recordings could easily be faked using modern technology. Sarah activated another display showing genetic analysis of the plague virus. These are the molecular structures of the virus that killed humanity, analyzed by our best scientists before the genocide began. Notice the artificial modifications to the viral DNA, specifically engineered to target human immune systems. Dr. Martinez appeared on a smaller display, broadcasting from their ship. The genetic markers are unmistakable. This virus was created in a laboratory, not evolved naturally. Furthermore, we have traced the specific techniques used to modify it back to research programs funded by Velcorian, Altarian, and Centaurian governments. Chancellor Brom 7 tried to stand, but the security restraints around his chair prevented movement. Even if this virus was artificially created, that doesn't prove we were involved. There could be other explanations. Perhaps you'd like us to play the recording of your conversation with Dr. Jek Prime about delivery methods? Sarah asked coldly. The one where you discussed introducing the virus through contaminated medical supplies sent as humanitarian aid. The Chancellor's face went pale and he slumped back in his restraints. Yanara continued the presentation, showing financial records that traced funding for the bioweapon research, personnel files of scientists who had worked on the project, and communication logs detailing the cover-up that followed humanity's extinction. The conspiracy involved over 200 individuals across 3 species, she explained. Scientists, military officers, politicians, and intelligence operatives all working together to eliminate humanity and hide the evidence. But why? Called out Ambassador Thish of the Regelian Federation. What possible justification could there be for such an action? Sarah activated the final set of displays, showing projections of human population growth and technological advancement that had been prepared by coalition analysts decades ago. According to these internal reports, the conspiracy members believed that humanity would become the dominant species in the galaxy within 2 centuries. Our population was growing faster than any other member species. Our technology was advancing at unprecedented rates, and our influence in galactic politics was expanding rapidly. The projections showed human colonies spreading throughout the galaxy, human-designed ships becoming the standard for interstellar travel, and human representatives taking leadership roles in increasing numbers of coalition institutions. They saw us as a threat to the established order, Sarah continued. Rather than adapt to a changing galaxy, they chose to eliminate the source of change. Dr. Martinez appeared on the display again. We've also discovered evidence that this wasn't their first attempt at species elimination. Our analysis of historical plague patterns suggests that at least 3 other species, extinctions over the past 5,000 years, were artificially induced. The chamber fell completely silent as the implications sank in. The coalition government hadn't just committed genocide against humanity. They had been secretly eliminating inconvenient species for millennia. Ambassador Krell stood slowly, her expression a mixture of horror and determination. On behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I formally apologize to the human survivors and to the memory of their extinct species. The crimes committed by our former colleagues are beyond forgiveness. Apologies are not enough, Sarah replied firmly. We demand full prosecution of everyone involved in the genocide, reparations for the loss of our species, and constitutional reforms to prevent this from ever happening again. What kind of reforms? Asked Ambassador Thish. Lieutenant Commander Morrison's voice came from their ship's communication system. Complete transparency in all government biological research, independent oversight of military operations, and most importantly, constitutional protections that make species-based discrimination a capital crime. And if the coalition refuses these demands, inquired Ambassador Yoleth of the Andromedan Collective. Sarah's expression hardened. Then we implement the backup plan we prepared during our years in hiding. Every coalition installation in the galaxy goes dark simultaneously, and we broadcast the evidence of your government's crimes to every populated world in known space. You're talking about the collapse of galactic civilization, Ambassador Krell said quietly. Your government already caused that collapse when it decided genocide was an acceptable tool of policy, Sarah replied. We're just offering you a chance to rebuild something better. The chamber erupted in heated debate as delegates argued among themselves about how to respond to the human demands. Some called for immediate acceptance of all terms, while others insisted that giving in to what they characterized as terrorist demands would set a dangerous precedent. Honored delegates, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the chaos, let me make something very clear. We are not terrorists. We are the survivors of a genocide, seeking justice through legal means. But we are also the last 400 members of a species that was systematically murdered by this government. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. You have 1 hour to decide whether you want to work with us to reform the coalition, or whether you want to explain to your populations why you're at war with the victims of your own government's crimes. As Sarah and Yanara left the chamber to allow the delegates to deliberate, Yanara realized that they had just triggered the greatest political crisis in galactic history. The evidence they had presented was overwhelming and undeniable. The coalition government, as it had existed for 50,000 years, was finished. The question now was what would replace it, and whether the survivors of humanity would live to see the new galaxy they were helping to create. In 1 hour, the galaxy would learn whether justice was possible, or whether the last humans would have to tear down everything their murderers had built in order to expose the truth. The countdown to humanity's final stand had begun. 6 months after the truth about humanity's extinction was revealed to the galaxy, Dr. Yanara Vell stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed memorial station, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on humanity's first permanent home since the genocide. The station orbited a planet the humans had chosen to call New Terra, located in a system far from the political centers of what had once been the Galactic Coalition. The galaxy had changed dramatically in those 6 months. The coalition government had collapsed within days of the humans' revelation, as member species withdrew their support and demanded the arrest of everyone involved in the conspiracy. Admiral Thorn Prime, Senator Vix 9, Chancellor Brom 7, and over 200 other officials were now serving life sentences on a prison world specifically designated for war criminals. But the real change went much deeper than just replacing corrupt leaders. The evidence of multiple genocides committed over millennia had shattered the trust that held galactic civilization together. Species that had cooperated for thousands of years now questioned every aspect of their relationships with each other. Doctor, Captain Sarah Chen's voice interrupted Yanara's thoughts. The council representatives are ready for the final negotiations. Yanara turned to see Sarah approaching, accompanied by Dr. Martinez and Lieutenant Commander Morrison. The 3 humans had become the de facto leadership of their species' remnant, though they insisted they were just temporary caretakers until their population could recover enough to hold proper elections. "How are the numbers looking?" Yanara asked as they walked toward the conference chamber. "Better than we hoped," Dr. Martinez replied. "The Genetic Diversity Preservation Program has identified viable reproductive possibilities for all 400 survivors. With careful planning and advanced medical assistance, we should be able to restore humanity's population to sustainable levels within 3 generations." It was a strange conversation to be having about an entire species, but these were strange times. The 400 humans aboard the memorial station represented the total genetic heritage of their entire race. Every decision they made about reproduction, child rearing, and cultural preservation would determine whether humanity truly returned from extinction or simply faded away gradually. "What about the other survivors?" Morrison asked. "Any word from the deep space reconnaissance teams?" Sarah shook her head sadly. "The search crews have found wreckage from 3 other Exodus ships. It looks like they were discovered and destroyed during the first year after the plague was released. We may truly be the only ones left." The weight of that reality had settled heavily on the human survivors. They were not just individuals trying to rebuild their lives. They were the sole repositories of an entire species' history, culture, and future potential. The responsibility was enormous, and Yanara had watched it age all of them over the past months. They entered the conference chamber where representatives from 47 species were waiting. The new Galactic Assembly, as it was now called, bore little resemblance to the old Coalition Council. Constitutional reforms had stripped away the secretive military and intelligence apparatus that had enabled the genocides, replacing it with transparent institutions subject to constant oversight by member species. Ambassador Krell, now serving as the Assembly's first elected president, stood to address the gathering. "We are here today to finalize the Humanity Restoration Accord, which will establish the legal framework for our species' return to galactic society." The negotiations had been complex and often emotional. Many species wanted to provide extensive assistance to help humanity recover, driven by guilt over what had been done in their name. Others worried about creating special privileges that might lead to resentment or repeat the power, imbalances that had contributed to the original genocide. The humans themselves had been surprisingly modest in their demands. They wanted recognition as a sovereign species, protection under the new constitutional framework, and assistance with their population recovery efforts. But they had rejected offers of advanced technology, preferential trading arrangements, or special representation in the Assembly. "We appreciate the galaxy's desire to help," Sarah had explained during one of the earlier sessions, "but we don't want to become dependent on charity. Our species' strength has always come from our ability to adapt and overcome challenges on our own terms." The final accord was a masterpiece of diplomatic compromise. Humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Assembly, with the same rights and responsibilities as any other species. A fund would be established to support their population recovery efforts, but it would be administered by human representatives rather than external bureaucrats. Most importantly, the new constitutional framework included absolute protections against species-based discrimination and mandatory disclosure of all biological research that could potentially be weaponized. Before we proceed with the formal signing, President Krell announced, "Captain Chen has requested permission to address the Assembly." Sarah stood and moved to the central podium, her expression serious as she looked out at the representatives of galactic civilization. Yanara had watched her evolve over the past months from a confused stasis survivor into a confident leader. But she could still see the weight of representing her entire species in Sarah's eyes. "Honored delegates," Sarah began. "6 months ago, my people returned from extinction carrying evidence of the greatest crime in galactic history. Today we gather to sign an agreement that will determine humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We want you to understand that we do not seek revenge for what was done to us. Billions of humans died in the genocide, but pursuing vengeance against entire species for the crimes of their leaders would make us no better than the people who tried to destroy us. However," she continued, her voice growing stronger, "we also cannot simply forgive and forget. The institutional failures that enabled our near extinction were not the result of a few corrupt individuals. They were the product of a system that prioritized stability over justice, secrecy over transparency, and power over principle." The chamber was completely silent as every delegate focused on her words. "The new Galactic Assembly has made important reforms, but reforms on paper are meaningless without constant vigilance. We, the survivors of humanity, pledge to serve as guardians against the return of the old ways. We will be the voice of inconvenient truth, the advocates for species that cannot advocate for themselves, and the reminder of what happens when good people remain silent in the face of evil." Sarah looked directly at President Krell. "We accept membership in the Galactic Assembly not as supplicants grateful for your charity, but as equals committed to ensuring that what happened to humanity never happens to anyone else." The signing ceremony that followed was broadcast to every populated world in the galaxy. For most species, it represented the end of the greatest political crisis in their history and the beginning of a new era of transparent governance. For humanity, it marked their formal return from extinction and their commitment to preventing future genocides. As the last signatures were added to the accord, Yanara found herself thinking about Dr. James Wright and his theory about competition between species. He had been right about the dangers but wrong about the inevitability of extinction. Sometimes a few survivors could make all the difference. After the ceremony ended, Yanara joined the human leadership on the observation deck to watch the sunset over New Terra. The planet below showed signs of early terraforming efforts, preparing it to support a growing human population in the years to come. "Do you think it will work?" Dr. Martinez asked quietly. "The new government, the constitutional protections, all of it?" "For a while," Morrison replied honestly. "But power always seeks to concentrate itself and secrecy always tries to return. Our job is to make sure future generations remember what happens when we stop paying attention." Sarah nodded in agreement. "That's why we're building more than just a new human civilization down there. We're building a monument to the importance of speaking truth to power, even when that truth is inconvenient." Yanara smiled, thinking about the archaeological sites she had studied over the years. "In my experience, the civilizations that survive are the ones that learn from their darkest moments, instead of trying to forget them." As the stars began to appear in New Terra's sky, 400 humans looked out at a galaxy that had tried to eliminate them completely. They had returned from extinction not as conquerors or victims, but as guardians committed to ensuring that the crimes committed against them would never be repeated. The galaxy had believed humanity was gone for good. They had been wrong about that and about so much else. But in being wrong, they had created something that might be better than what had come before. A galactic government built on transparency rather than secrecy, justice rather than convenience, and the hard-learned wisdom that some truths are too important to remain hidden. Humanity was back, and they had brought accountability with them. The galaxy would never be the same again, and that was exactly what needed to happen. The age of convenient lies was over. The age of inconvenient truths had begun.